Hello, everyone. Both those who are here sitting around the table and those who may be watching from wherever, from Staten Island or from Nicaragua, or last
Kenya.
week there was someone from Kenya. So, again, Bruchim Habayim, welcome. Well, I want to just tell you that tonight, is a very special night, because tonight is Lag BaOmer, or as the Sfaradim say, Lag LaOmer, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer. And that is a special day, and we're going to find out a little bit about why tonight. And the Lag BaOmer is observed in different kinds of ways that we all should know about. One, for people who observe the morning restrictions of the Sfira period, for many of them who start when the counting of the Omer begins on the second night of Passover, the morning period and the restrictions on music and weddings and cutting your hair and all that stuff are over on Lag BaOmer. So that's something. And, okay, I have to get a haircut tomorrow, you know. Right? And so that's one thing. Also, on Lag BaOmer, there's a custom, and it's based on various verses that have to do with Shimon bar Yochai, who we'll hear about in a moment. There's a custom to light bonfires. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were some bonfires going right here on Staten Island. My son Yochai in Inwood, Long Island, usually doesn't quite have a bonfire, but he has one of those fire pits. And he lights it, and they study Torah in his backyard around the fire pit. And if I was not doing this class, I would be there now. So regards to Shaya, greetings to Shaya, and at his Lag BaOmer celebration. Now,
So Esther Jacobson is watching.
Oh,
Yochanan Franco is watching.
1 year we ought
Miriam Friend is
Good.
watching.
1 year we ought to do a bonfire here in our temple in the backyard, not in our temple, but in the backyard. And and many people, many thousands of people go to Meron in Israel, in the Galilee. Hey, come on in. And Meron is located on the mountaintop, and this is, according to some, according to most actually, there's also another suggestion someplace else, there is the tomb of Shimon bar Yochai, who is considered by many to be the author of the Zohar, the major book of Jewish mysticism. And people go to Meron and have a great time, bonfires and camping out and barbecues, and also giving children, 3-year-old boys, their first haircut. And it's a custom to wait till 3 to give a boy a haircut, and it's compared to the trees of the field, the fruit trees, where we don't use the fruit tree until the 3rd year. So those are some of the Lag BaOmer observances. And today we'll be studying some material which actually has a little bit to do with Lag BaOmer. Now, just a little bit of a historical background. You know, traditionally, I'd say, Jewish texts, traditional Jewish texts, maybe Josephus is sort of an exception, they don't study history in the conventional way of Western society. History is recalled in legends and stories and those kinds of things which have a message. And it's not so much what happened and who said what to who, but kind of general impressions of what's going on and what it means. Well, so historians would look at events in Judaism and Jewish texts and say, well, what was really going on? Well, I don't know if they figured out what was really going on, but around Lag BaOmer there was a guess. And what was that guess? Well, and we'll go over the text actually later. It says in traditional texts of the Talmud and other places that Rabbi Akiva had large numbers of students, and it varies from 12,000 to 40,000, depending on what you read, and that during the Sfira period, many thousands of the students died, And the plague stopped on the 33rd day of the counting, on Lag BaOmer, and then it began again, according to some, and according to others, it just stopped. Well, the 19th century historian Krachmal, along with others, said, well, that story doesn't make any sense. What is this? And why, in the rabbinic literature, says, why did they die? Because they were not respectful to each other. Well, when all of a sudden the students die because of disrespect, and it stops on a certain day, and all this. So Krachmal and other 19th century historians says, oh, really must be going on. We know that Rabbi Akiva, who was the teacher of Shimon bar Yochai, who is buried in Meiron, and the celebration is Lag BaOmer, which is Yochai, was a supporter of the revolt of Bar Kokhba. And for those of you who are familiar with it, but the revolt of Bar Kokhba either started or ended in the year 135, and the Jews led by Bar Kokhba drove the Romans out of the land of Israel and from Jerusalem itself. But then the Romans, well organized as they were and patient, came back. They brought an important general from Britain to be their leader, and they conquered the land of Israel, and with tremendous damage and loss of life. And after this time, one seldom hears of the Jewish villages around Jerusalem anymore. And it seems that perhaps the people of those places were either massacred or fled. And so after Bar Kokhba, Jews were no longer a majority in the land of Israel, and everything was downhill from there. So these 19th century historians came up with the idea that that Lag BaOmer was a kind of surreptitious memorial to the soldiers, the fighters of Bar Kokhba. Well, whether it was or not, who can say? But we could say that before the 19th century, people didn't think of that. But in any case, especially the early Zionist movement emphasized Lag BaOmer as an example, and its connection with Bar Kokhba, emphasized the Bar Kokhba revolt as an example of Jewish heroism and fighting courage and military prowess. So that's something of Lag BaOmer, another dimension to it. So we can have two Lag BaOmers, either that of the Yochai, the Hilula of Rashbi, of Shimon bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, or we can look at it as an example of Jewish heroism and the fighting spirit, so to speak, represented by Bar Kokhba. So that's a little bit about Lag BaOmer. So I want to wish everybody happy Lag BaOmer. And I apologize for not having a bonfire. But instead of the bonfire, we have some texts. And first, I want to look at a text about Shimon bar Yochai. Well, if you look in our little package of texts, it's on the 4th page, counting each double-sided page as one. Okay? Very good. So here we have one of the very famous stories of Shimon bar Yochai. And if you look at this, you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 5 lines. Anybody want to read it? Do we have a volunteer still reading? It starts with the Gemara relates.
All right, so I'm not on the right page. 4th page.
Let me find it for you.
1, 2, 3.
4th
Fourth page.
The Gemara relates.
4th, 5th page.
Okay.
Okay. The Gemara asks,
The fifth one.
The Gemara relates
The Gemara relates
that this resulted.
due to an incident that took place with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef. And Rabbi Shimon were sitting, Yehuda, son of converts, sat beside
So these four people are sitting together and talking. And, you know, today there's a lot of concern about surveillance or people reporting what somebody else talks to others, and people getting in trouble because of it. And it's interesting that in the Gemara they talk about the virtues of various nations, and one of the virtues of the Persians is that if they have something secret or private to say to somebody, they go out into the fields, because otherwise you don't know who's listening. So here they were discussing the Romans. Want to continue on?
Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they establish marketplaces, establish bridges, and establish bathhouses." Rabbi Yosef was silent. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai responded and said, "Everything that they establish only for their own purposes. They establish marketplaces to place prostitutes in, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them." Yehuda, son of converts, went and related their statements to his household, and those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy.
Ah, so the rulers, probably the Romans, heard about this conversation of prominent Jewish leaders. And Shimon ben Gerim leaked the conversation. And there have to be consequences. Okay.
Chris Bauer is watching, Andres is watching, Marion Kalmakoff is watching, Moshe Enriquez is watching, Mark Newman is watching.
Very nice. So again, thank you all for watching, and special greetings to Moshe in Nicaragua, and I hope things are going well there, because I understand there was been a lot of problems in Nicaragua of late. Okay, let's go on. So Yehuda, who said good things about the Romans, he got a good job. Okay.
They ruled and said, "Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages and head of the speakers in every place. Yochai, who remained silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea as punishment and sent to the city of Tzipori in the Galilee. And Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed."
Shimon bar Yochai was supposed to have been killed. And so what does Shimon do? Let's hear now.
Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar went and hid in the study hall. Every day Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "Women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern, lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts."
So first they hid. Where did they hid? They hid in the Beit Midrash. Well, if you were looking for a rabbinical scholar, maybe the Beit Midrash is the first place you'd look. So it doesn't seem like such a great hiding place. But apparently only his wife knew that they were there, and they were afraid that she would be tortured and reveal the secret. So they hid in. So now what happens?
They went and they hid in a cave. A miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray. And they would again remove their clothes afterwards so they would not become tattered.
It's a kind of an odd story. What do you think they did that for? Well, I guess there were no clothing shops there hiding in the cave. Okay. And how long were they in the cave?
They sat in the cave for 12 years, Rabbi.
Whoa. That's a long time to stay in a cave. So in that 12 years in the cave, what did they have to do? They only had to study Torah, right? And I think we ran out of copies. We have more people than I expected. They studied, they plumb the depths of Torah and understanding it and so forth for 12 years sitting in a cave. And in the cave, I guess they had no distractions. They could really, get into it. And so they were studying for 12 years, okay?
I think Kathy was sitting there.
Kathy
You
was
could find another chair.
And where did she?
I doubt she ran away, so
She
she said she
probably went to
wanted
the-
to sit.
Okay. So they sat in the cave for 12 years and studied Torah. Okay. Continue on and see what happened. Now, after 12 years, I guess the emperor wasn't, maybe there's a new emperor, or they didn't care anymore, or whatever. But they had been in the cave for 12 years, and that changed them. So we'll hear what happens.
Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance of the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died? Here you go, and his decree has been abrogated." They
So
emerged.
now they go out from the cave and this, let's say, hothouse of studying Torah into the real world where people are doing their everyday things. Okay.
They emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "These people abandon eternal life of Torah study and engage in temporal life for their own sustenance." The Gemara relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world?"
Okay. So here they were in this world of intense spirituality and Torah study. And when they emerged from the cave, anything they looked at, and they saw people doing their normal business, planting and reaping and, just going around their day. Anything they looked at, their eyes burned and destroyed. What do you think that's about? How do you understand that? Any responses to that? Why was it that after all this intense thing and they saw people doing ordinary activities, they just couldn't stand it, and so much so that their eyes, they burned people with their look? Any thoughts on that? How about somebody overseas and some watching from a distance? Well, perhaps it was that they had come to the conclusion that ordinary everyday life was sort of not living up to the potential for holiness, and that the real task was to study Torah and be involved in intense spirituality, and they couldn't understand. They couldn't stand it when people weren't, and therefore their eyes burned them. Their eyes burned them up. Okay. Now, their eyes burned them up. Now, so what does God say to all this?
A divine voice emerged and said to them,
They're having a problem with this. It's been stopping and starting for some reason.
Well, okay. Well, let's continue on with the class, though.
Judgment of wicked, read that? The judgment of the wicked, like the sentence?
Perhaps.
Yeah, all right.
So what did they say? Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? And what comes after that? What did the voice from heaven say to them?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Return to your cave. They again went and sat there for 12 months. They said, the judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time.
So who sinned? Who sinned? Was it the people, or was it Shimon bar Yochai and his son, who burned everything up with their glances?
It seems that those who burn, who caused others to be burned by their glances.
So here, they were in this great state of holiness, but they sinned. And they went back to God sent them back to the cave for 12 months in order to cool off.
Cave sounds like jail.
Oh, well, maybe.
Because how long was it before? How many years?
They were there for 12
now
years.
It's 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what Gehenna is. It's
Sounds like they got a parole violation.
It's hell or something similar.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's something unspoken that they do.
Yeah.
Something unspoken.
What do you think?
Judgment.
Maybe. If you were guessing, what would you think what do you think the unspoken thing that they did was? Well, we'll leave that as a guess. So they went into the
The one thing
Yeah.
you haven't said is that even though they showed great holiness by studying and being away for 12 years,
yeah.
everything they saw was destroyed, which suggests that all of these innocent people had their crops and things burned and destroyed. So it had something to do with those who try to approach holiness without understanding. Sort of the Akiva story.
Yeah.
Some made it. Akiva made it. The others didn't. So it's not exactly the Akiva story.
Right,
It's
right.
related.
Yeah.
Maybe it's related. That's my
Okay.
opinion.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. So they were in such a state of intensity that anybody they looked at was burned. They couldn't stand it. That people did things and were engaged in the ordinary worldly practices of life. And so they sent back to the cave for 12 months, and then a divine voice.
A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Emerge from your cave." They emerged. Everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world, as the two of us are engaged in the proper study of Torah."
Okay, so that's how they thought themselves. They were engaged in the proper study of Torah. But then they see something which sort of changes the picture. Continue on with that.
As the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. They said to him, "Why do you have these?" He said to them, "In honor of Shabbat." They said to him, "And let one suffice," he answered them. One is corresponding to remember the Shabbat day, to keep it holy, and one is corresponding to observe the Shabbos day, to keep it holy.
Because you see, the Ten Commandments are both in Exodus and in Deuteronomy. And the one in Shemot in Exodus says, Shemor, observe the Shabbat. And the one in Deuteronomy says, the one in Exodus says, Zechor, remember the Shabbat. And the one in Devarim says Shamor at Shabbat, keep the Shabbat. So we do a lot of things double on Shabbat, one for Shamor and one for Zechor. Keep and remember. So this person who was gathering sticks had one for the different aspects of Shabbat. Okay?
Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "See how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel. Their minds were put at ease."
That's the end of the story they wanted to do. So then they saw that people loved Shabbat and loved Torah through ordinary, everyday actions. And then their minds were put at ease. So what do you think the story is telling? That when they were at a period of such intensity, they went out and destroyed things. But then they saw people who are just observing and keeping and respecting and loving the Shabbat and loving Torah in a very ordinary way, ordinary everyday way, gathering sticks, but said, this bundle is for Zachor, this is for Shamor. And they realized that maybe there was a lot of worth in the ordinary way in which ordinary people observed the Torah. So I like that story, and that's the story of Shimon Bar Yochai, whose Yochai
I can't
is
talk now.
today.
I can't talk now. Bye.
Tonight, so that's an important story.
Can we take a minute break here, because it says that the connection is low network connection. Maybe I can
Okay,
work on it.
let's take a minute break to see if we could
Because
figure
people are
it out.
saying that it's coming in and off, and they have to keep refreshing.
So we got everything back working again. I'm very happy about that. So we went over the story of Shimon Bar Yochai, and this is in honor of Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, and whose Yochai is tonight. And what makes Shimon Bar Yochai special is that, according to the Zohar, he is the author of the Zohar, right? And the main book of Kabbalah. So Shimon Bar Yochai is, and when did he have a chance to find out all the secrets of the Torah that's in the Kabbalah? Maybe when he was studying in the cave. But here is a parallel story. And, sometimes you wonder if one story was taken from another or copied or whatever, or maybe the same similar thing happened twice. That could happen too. Well, we go back to the Holocaust years. Well, it's a lot more recent than Shimon Bar Yochai in the time of the Romans, to what's now Slovakia. And in the town of Nitra, there was a yeshiva. And the head of the yeshiva was Rabbi Weissmandel. And Rabbi Weissmandel was a great scholar and also a community leader. And he and others in Slovakia were involved with bribing the German collaborator government of Slovakia to delay the deportation of the Jews to the death camp. It's interesting, just as an aside, that this government was headed by a Father Tiso, a Roman Catholic priest. Well, I guess they're not proud of him. But and they were successful for quite a while. But eventually, they were not. And Rabbi Weissmandel and his son hid. And they hid in some small little space, some room, some hiding place somewhere. And they stayed there for years and studied Torah. And when they finally were able to come out, according to this story, it wasn't the Zohar that they came up with, but the whole concept of the codes in the Torah. And some of you are familiar with that, where the idea that the Torah is composed of codes, and if you count letters at certain intervals, words will come up, which point to both events of the past and events of the future. So you make a pattern every fourth letter, every 10th letter, every 12th letter. And you take those things and make words. And those are the codes in the Torah. So according to this story, Rabbi Weissmandel and his son came up with that while they were hiding in a secret hiding place during the Holocaust, and had nothing to do for years but study and meditate on Torah. So it's an interesting parallel.
At the very center of the Torah, you read from left to right, is the word heart or something like that?
Something like that, and you have these codes, and the people who really go for them believe that they not only tell you what happened, point out events that happened in the past, but will tell you the future as well. So, again, it's a good parallel to the story of Shimon Bar Yochai. And so we'll think about that. Now, what happened with Rabbi Weissmandel is kind of interesting. After the war was over, he emigrated to the United States, and he founded a new version of the Nitra Yeshiva in Mount Kisco, New York, in Westchester County. And it's known as the Jewish farm settlement. Because I think in the first years, they actually did farming there. I don't think they do that anymore, but it still remains, and it's still yeshiva, and a Jewish community around the yeshiva, and that's, I guess, a memorial to that story, to the story of Rabbi Weissmandel. I don't know if you went through the yeshiva and asked them about the codes in the story, if they would have the same version of it, or maybe would have it at all. But nevertheless, there it is, an interesting parallel to the story.
Is
Now,
the congregation like Kabbalistic or?
well, it's a yeshiva. People study Torah and all that stuff. And whether I don't know too much about it. I just know that I know somebody who was once looking for a mikveh in Westchester County, and somehow ended up going there, and everything was fine. But that's all I know about it firsthand. The Nitra Yeshiva in Mount Kisco. So anyway, from Shimon Bar Yochai to Slovakia to Mount Kisco. But so that's something, and that's in honor of what's called Hilula de Rashbi, the Yochai of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I mentioned before, for those who were here, that what people do is they make big bonfires and dance around bonfires and have a great time and take children for their first haircuts. At least one of my grandchildren had their first haircut there. And I'm sure they all had a great time in Meron. And thousands of people come there. And I was reading an article about it today, that there are all kind of extra buses and transportation. And if you have the means and the will, you can even go there by helicopter from both Jerusalem and Tel Aviv to be with Shimon Bar Yochai on this day. So that's a little bit about, that's a story in honor of Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, now another bit of a story. And Rabbi Akiva, of all people, his story is one of the more romantic stories in all of rabbinic literature. And it's a story that tells us a lot. And I think we could learn a lot from. I was in the city of Tveria. No, it was not. It was near Tveria, in the outside of Tveria. There were outside of Tveria, Tiberias, by the Sea of Galilee. There are lots of cemeteries and places like that. And we came. Someone said, "I want to show you the tomb of Rachel." Now, does anybody know where the usual tomb of Rachel is?
Bethlehem, or
Yeah,
is it-
Bethlehem,
it
right?
is, in fact,
So what's
Bethlehem.
the tomb of Rachel in Tiberias? And he said, well, I asked him that question. He said, no, it's the tomb of Rachel, the wife of Rabbi Akiva. And it was actually renovated by Jews from France, and is a very beautiful place. And I thought a somewhat inspiring place as well. Now, let's look at the story of Akiva and his wife and his father-in-law. And that's it's this first page with a larger writing. Yeah. Now, I'll do the preface to this, and there are different versions of this story, and this one doesn't have some of the parts that other versions have. But I like this story because this one is in a certain way a little bit, has one little incident which I think is very romantic and sweet. So what's the first part of the story? I'll tell it. And that is Rabbi Akiva. He wasn't Rabbi Akiva, he was Akiva. Akiva ben Yosef. There's some statements that his father was a convert. But Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef was a shepherd. And he worked for a boss who had a lot of shepherds and sheep. And the boss's name was, and sheep, not sheep. The boss's name was Kalba Savua, which means satiated cow or calf. Yeah, I don't know. I wish that's not such a nice name, but I guess it shows that he was prosperous, you know, and full and all of that.
Partly.
And he had a daughter named Rachel. And somehow, the farmhand, the ignorant shepherd, who's 40 years old, a lot older than her, falls in love with the boss's daughter, the beautiful Rachel. And she asks him to marry her. He asks her to marry him. And she answers saying, well, I can't marry you because you're ignorant. You're illiterate.
What?
You're illiterate. How can I marry an illiterate shepherd who doesn't know even any Torah? And according to this version of the story, what does he do? He's very despondent, but he sees a stream where water drips. In some versions, it's a well where the buckets constantly drip. And he looks, and he sees that the drops wore the stones smooth. And he thinks, well, if the drops dripping over a period of time can wear the stones smooth, then I can become educated and study Torah. And first, he wants to know the alphabet. So he goes to school with the little kids who are learning the alphabet and stands in the back and learns the alphabet with them. Well, finally, they do become, according to one version, they become married. Another version, they're only betrothed in the beginning. But, so now let's read from this version of the story.
You want to say welcome, Andres?
Oh, welcome to Andres and Alexis.
And Arlene
Arlene Groner,
Groner,
wow,
Esther
Esther.
Shin, Mara.
Mara.
Hi,
Mara used to be around here. Now she lives, I think, in the Carolinas.
Raina,
Or something.
Mel Felstein.
Michael Sirota's watching from right
Michael's-
across the table. Okay, great. And anyway, so now Kathy, want to read a little bit? I'll give it to you. You have the spot where it says Rabbi Akiva can be betrothed.
Rabbi Akiva became betrothed to the daughter of Bar Kalba Savua. When Bar Kalba, what's this called?
Savua, yeah.
Savua heard about their betrothal, he took a vow prohibiting her from eating all of his
In
property.
other words, he disinherited her. He wouldn't support her, wouldn't give her anything. Continue.
Despite this, she went ahead and married Rabbi Akiva. In the winter, they would sleep in a storehouse of straw, and Rabbi Akiva would gather strands of straw from her hair. He said to her, if I had the means, I would place on your head a Jerusalem of gold, a type of crown.
He would give her the most beautiful golden jewelry, and they had a special piece of jewelry that was referred to as Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of gold. Okay, continue.
Elijah the prophet came and appeared to them as a regular person and started calling and knocking on the door. He said to them, give me a bit of straw as my wife gave birth, and I do not have anything on which to lay her. Rabbi Akiva said to his wife, see this man who does not even have straw. We should be happy with our lot, as we at least have straw to sleep on.
Well, what do you think that last little piece about tells us? What value does that? What idea does that give us? Yeah.
Be grateful for what you have.
Be grateful for what you have. But what did Akiva and Rachel have between each other? Which is have between each other. Hmm?
Love.
Yeah. To me, it's such a beautiful image that taking the straw from her hair and said, if I were able to, I would buy you the most beautiful golden crown. And here they were sleeping in some kind of a hut in the winter and sleeping on the straw. But there are people who don't have straw. So I guess, you know, the lesson probably is, what do you think the lesson probably
Well,
is?
this is a cliffhanger.
Yeah,
I want to know if he gave this poor old man some straw.
if he, it doesn't say if he gave the poor man some straw.
He just said, hey, let's be grateful for what we
I
have.
think that the lesson is whatever we have, we should be grateful for.
Right.
And be willing to share it. But it doesn't say that here.
Well, it doesn't say that. So that's a very good point. So is it that it doesn't say that because it assumes that he would have given? Or maybe it's trying to make the other point that we should be grateful for what we have and deliberately doesn't make the point that we have to share the little which we have. Well, I think it's the first, but anybody have any other thoughts?
Mindy is watching now.
Oh, Mandy is watching.
Oh.
Very nice to hear you, Mandy. And Mandy is working on, I think it's going to be the 17th, a meeting on security grants. The government is giving security grants to religious organizations. And we plan on having, COJO, Council of Jewish Organizations, plans on having a meeting in which we will invite leaders of all the different faith groups to hear about how to apply for that. That's inside. So Mandy's doing a good job. Yay, Mandy. Okay. So, now.
There's a comment here that they want to see who's in the audience, but I'm not changing the camera around because you'll get all this, okay?
No, you might lose your connection again.
Yeah, so we apologize to people, not, maybe some people want to be incognito. And also, our connections here are very delicate, so we don't want to do anything to mess them
But
up.
it's working now.
Yeah.
Now it's the best.
Okay. So,
This theme runs through Tanakh.
yeah.
And other forms. I mean, we've all heard the proverb of, I complained about having no shoes till I saw a man with no feet.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yes.
It's the same
Yeah.
thought.
So let's think about ourselves and all the things that we complain about or feel bad about. And are we overlooking the good that we have or not appreciating it? Maybe we are. That there's a movement in Jewish spiritual development called the Musar movement. And that really started in it didn't start, but it flowered, let's say, into a formal movement in the Lithuanian yeshivas in the later part of the 19th century, the early 20th century. And that is to take different spiritual and ethical qualities and try to examine yourself on them and think about them carefully and try to work on self-improvement. And I'm part of a group that's involved with this project like this, and me and some of my fellow rabbis, we try, like, once a week we have a class that's online, and then we have study partners where we talk about how each other could improve ourselves in this. And actually today's midah, the one we did today, the spiritual quality was gratefulness. And so I guess we all should be grateful. Look, we are around the table studying Torah, and that's a great privilege. How many times and places were Jews not allowed to do that? And also, how many people are there out there that are not aware of the beauty and interest and the profundity of our tradition? And here we are in a safe, warm, bright place. We're not like Shimon Bar Yochai in a cave having to bury ourselves up to the neck in sand so our clothes don't wear out or something like that.
You can only eat carrot, nothing
Right,
else.
and we have corn chips, and he only had carrots. Well, carrots are pretty good too.
Oh, okay.
I think we have some carrots in the leftover from Tu B'Shvat actually in the kitchen.
So
The
are-
midah, the quality of gratefulness, yeah?
So are we saying poverty is a state of mind? Or is there an actual point where poverty becomes grinding and
What do you think?
and it's hard to
What do you
lift
think?
yourself out of?
I think it's more just the concept of being positive, having a positive attitude. Whatever you have, you don't have some stuff and you got other stuff, but the point is to, the glass is full, not, half full.
Right.
Poverty is the absence of hope. It's not necessarily the absence of pecuniary means.
Well, that's,
I heard that one.
I think
You've heard
that's-
it or you haven't heard it?
That it is the absence of hope, that,
And even then, there are different levels depending on how you find meaning.
Mhm. Well, the
Whereas
absence of,
You're wrong. Just-
yeah,
In Victorian London, there were people who didn't even have a place to sleep. I mean, they had to sleep hanging over a rope on a seat. It's pretty hard, I would think it's pretty hard.
Primo Levi's book on survival in Auschwitz. That's the book on how do you find, when is the bare necessity of meaning, how does it get you through the next day and hour?
Rabbi Ivri is asking a question.
oh, very good.
What's the difference between Jewish pessimist and a Jewish optimist?
That sounds like a preface to a joke.
Primo Levi, L-E-V-I.
So what's the difference between Jewish pessimist and Jewish optimist?
We're okay for now.
Does he have an answer for that?
He only wrote a couple, Primo Levi, I can't remember.
all right, but I.
So you have Alex from Nicaragua,
Sorry.
Well,
Moshe Enriquez, Esther Shana.
yeah. I think us Jews tend to be optimistic. That we believe that, you know, it says in the Torah, after each day it says ki tov, that God said it was good. So I think we believe that the bad things in the world are incidental rather than intrinsic, and they could be fixed.
Rabbi Ivri said, a Jewish pessimist says it can't get any worse. The Jewish optimist says, yes, it can.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, so now the story continues. Hi, Susan, and
Mark Newman.
hi, Mark, and now Rachel asks her husband to go and study Torah. Want to continue? Who's reading it? Kathy?
Go and be a student of Torah. He went and studied Torah for 12 years before Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. At the completion of the 12 years, he was coming home when he heard from behind his house that one wicked person was saying to his wife, "Your father behaved well toward you. He was right to disinherit you. Your husband is not similar to you, i.e., he is not suitable for you. And furthermore, he has left you in widowhood in his lifetime all these years." She said to him, "If he listens to me, he should be there for another 12 years. Rabbi Akiva said, "Since she has given me permission through this statement, I will go back and study more." He turned back and went to the study hall, and he was there for another 12 years.
The study hall means you
Just-
don't.
It means the place where they study Torah.
Place where you
Yeah.
hang out with your wife, is that,
The study hall, what?
you hang out with your wife and put her in widowhood? Is that
Well, no, because he went away to study.
like away?
He went away. So she was alone. So the person who's talking to her, you know, who wants to upset her and make her feel bad, say, "Oh, you're like a widow without a husband,"
Because he had to go a distance.
because he's studying and, you know, and he's away. She answers him, who knows if she really meant it, you know, what she thought. Well, I wouldn't care if he was away another 12 years studying Torah, so he goes away another 12 years. Okay? I like that part of the story. What?
That doesn't sound romantic.
No, it doesn't. But it shows the dedication of his wife Rachel, right? Doesn't it? And there are different versions of this story in different sources, and they have different pieces. And so now he's been studying for this long time. 12 years is the same amount of years that Shimon Bar Yochai stayed in the cave. It's parallel. Okay, and now continue. Now he's the famous Rabbi Akiva. and he's on his way back home. Okay.
Eventually, he came back accompanied by 24,000 pairs of students.
There's different versions of this story. They have different numbers. One has 12,000, 40,000, 24,000, and so, okay.
Everyone went out to greet him, as he was by then a renowned teacher, and she too arose to go out to greet him. That wicked person said to her, "And to where are you going?" She was not dressed in a grand manner, as fit for the wife of one so esteemed. She said to him, "A righteous man regards the life of his beast. He knows that I am in this state as a result of my dedication to him." She came to present herself before Rabbi Akiva, but the sages tried to fend her off as they were unaware of her identity.
So what a sad story. And I'm going to finish it from not from the text. So here he's finally coming back, and he's this big and his wife wants to greet him with everybody else, but his wife is kind of probably older looking and worn out and not dressed nice, and the same troublesome person says, how could you go out to sea and dress like that? And she says, well, he knows why I don't look so fashionable and so happy, perhaps. And so he goes to meet Akiva, and the students chase her away. They fend her off. And then Akiva stops them and says, everything that I am and everything that you are all because of her.
Mm-hmm. And
so I think that's a wonderful love story, and it gives us a lot to think about. Again, the idea of gratefulness. So Rabbi Akiva was grateful that his wife allowed him to do this and become a great scholar. Now, one more little part of the story, which is not in this version, of course, is...
We have two comments here that
yeah,
you should...
well, I'll
get to them later.
okay. Well, then I'll address those comments. So we have the other little part of the story is on the way when he was coming back, accompanied by the crowds of students. Who goes out to meet him but his father-in-law, Kalba Savua? And his father-in-law, in one version of the story, meets him, doesn't he knows it's his father-in-law, but his father-in-law doesn't think that Akiva, the hired hand shepherd, is now the great Rabbi Akiva. And he knows in Jewish law, if you make a vow, but there's some condition that had you known about it, you wouldn't have made the vow. Then a scholar can release you from the vow. So he says to the scholar, I disinherited, I cut off my daughter-in-law, my daughter, because of her husband. I feel bad about that. I wish there was a way to get out of the vow. And Akiva asked him why he made the vow. He said, because this person was an idiot, illiterate. How could I have my daughter marry her? And he asked her, well, if you thought that he could learn something, would you have made the vow? And according to this version of the story, he says, if I knew that he could even learn a few letters, I wouldn't have made the vow. And then he releases him from the vow. And one version of it is that he ends up giving them all his money. And there's one section, I think it's in the Gemara Nadarim, but I might have the wrong quote, that says that Rabbi Akiva became rich later on because all kinds of people gave him money, and he also dealt in precious objects. And there's one little story, which is a good one, I think, that's about that someone who's dressed very, not like a poor person, comes to Rabbi Akiva and says, I want to buy a pearl, very valuable pearl. come to my house. And Akiva was hesitant because how could this poor person afford a pearl? And he goes to the house and he buys the pearl, takes out a chest of gold. Here, I'll buy the pearl. And then he grinds it up to fine powder. Akiva says, what's going on? He says, well, I'm making a medication from this that a lot of people would be helped by grinding the pearl up and putting it into whatever, and I go around like a poor person in order to avoid pride and making people feel uncomfortable and so forth. That's just an aside story. But I like the story of Rabbi Akiva. We had a question. The question was, someone
The question is from Nicaragua.
from Nicaragua, right? And what's the question?
Why is it said that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is a believer in the Zohar if history records Rabbi Moshe de Leon, native of Barcelona, is the author? And Rabbi Ivri made a comment that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai authored the Zohar.
Okay, well,
So you can.
so this is a matter of dispute and argument about who wrote the Zohar and where it came from. And Kabbalah and the material of the Zohar has always been a matter of some controversy in Judaism. There were the Kabbalists, and there were those people who didn't like Kabbalah, who thought that the teaching of Kabbalah was wrong, theologically and spiritually and so forth. There was that. And the opponents of Kabbalah and the adherents of Kabbalah differed on this. And Gershon Sholem, who was the great scholar, academic scholar of Jewish mysticism, wrote extensively on this subject. And I would say the Kabbalists mostly believe that Shimon bar Yochai wrote the Zohar. And that's the traditional answer that many people believe, that Shimon bar Yochai wrote the Zohar. And that gives the Zohar a lot of authority, because then the Zohar, it was written in the period of the Tanaim, of the early rabbis. So then the Zohar is, kind of on the same level, maybe even more than the Mishnah and the other great classical works of Judaism. But there were others who thought that the Zohar was written by Moshe de Leon, who lived, I believe, in the 1200s, near Barcelona in Spain. And it's based on something that happened, stories that are recorded from Moshe de Leon's lifetime, where how did the Zohar come into existence? Moshe de Leon said he had this ancient book, this ancient, very important and deep book, and people would go to him, and he would copy it out from his original old ancient book, a page at a time or a couple pages, and give them a couple pages to study. And that's how it was spread. And remember, the Zohar and Kabbalah, especially in the earlier period, were for the elite, not for the everybody. It was not supposed to be popular literature, only for the worthy. And we when we're doing the Men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Gedola, and one of the things is they said have many students. That was one of their messages. So to popularize things, that spread it out everyone. But the Zohar was supposed to be only for those people who were worthy, who could understand it. Okay. Now, when he died, when Moshe de Leon died, there's some kind of story written that people right away went to his wife and said they want to buy the manuscript that all of these pages came from. And she didn't have it. And she also, in one version of this, said that she saw her write it. She saw him write it himself. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, if you follow that line of thought, then the Zohar comes from the Middle Ages, the period of the Rishonim, the early rabbis of the Middle Ages, who are people of great authority, equal to the people of the Tanaim. So that's what the dispute lies on. In terms of academic scholarship, the Yochai wrote it, but that consensus from the latest things that I've read, and I've not really kept up with all the scholarly literature, said, no, this book could not have been just written by one man, and living at that time, that the ideas in it and the diversity of materials make that unlikely. So they didn't say that Shimon Bar Yochai wrote it, but they said, well, it was more than Moshe de Leon. So I think that's where the academics leave it. So we have a difference of opinion about it, and one that's been around for a very long time. So I'm not going to...
So the best story is that he's the final editor, not necessarily the author.
Maybe, right. And also the mystery is what happened to the manuscript, right? So,
Was there ever a manuscript?
or was there ever one? So I'm not going to try to weigh in on either side of that, but it's a question. So the people who both sides should realize that there is another version of where the Zohar comes from. But wherever it comes from is still very remarkable, very wonderful, and very profound.
Looking in, Noah, Grodowski, Yvette, and Dee.
Ah, nice to have you with us, yeah?
So was this a compilation of parables intended to teach certain points? Because there are aspects of the stories that are frankly quite disturbing to me as a woman.
Okay. I think it was. I think to teach certain points. Now, let me ask you, what do you find particularly disturbing about this story?
That as devoted as Akiva's wife was,
Okay. Okay,
and I
well,
don't think justice was done. Although from her point of view, maybe she was fine with it.
right.
She might have loved it.
Yeah.
She might have loved
The
suffering.
No, she might have loved the separation.
She might have loved the separation. Now, what does that say about this romantic couple? So what would have been sufficient? What, in your mind, what do you think Rabbi Akiva should have done that he didn't do? Anything occur to you that would have been the right kind of response? Maybe that just telling the students that everything you are and I am is because of her wasn't sufficient.
Send me a letter every 6 years.
We don't know that. Some versions of the stories, they seem to have, spent time together during the intervening years. Yeah.
I mean, that we are in now, physically and in time is so different. I can't understand, like, how far was away, and what's the thing with 12 years? And didn't they have a holiday, like a Christmas break or something?
Okay.
I mean, what's the deal with?
But
I don't get it.
But again, there are different versions of the story. But if you would say that, where he was studying was just 10 miles down the road, and he came back for all the holidays and sometimes for Shabbos, it wouldn't be such a good story. It would take away from the story. So if you look at the story as a literary piece,
Yes, a parable.
then longer. So, but what do you think are some of the points of the story that the story's trying to make? Well, what was the point of the first part, where Rabbi Akiva changes from the ignorant shepherd to the scholar?
We could all be learners.
Yeah, we could all. So if somebody hasn't picked up a book or hasn't learned Torah ever, maybe they can.
And not just anybody, but someone who wants to.
Motivated.
Right.
Must be-
And
that element must be present.
was his motivation purely for love of Torah?
was for love of his wife.
Love of Rachel,
She
right?
actually made it a requirement.
But she made it a requirement, so maybe,
She had a pretty sweet dowry coming,
yeah,
which was big at the time.
right. So, as sacrifice to herself, she made it a requirement for the relationship. So, that's, that says something, about her, and her values, and what she thought was important. But yeah?
I want to say a funny thing. So I was once dating somebody who actually introduced me to my husband, and I felt he wasn't learned enough. So I said, go study in Israel for a year.
Rachel.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
and so, I think that this is a common thing, especially sometimes the women are more knowledgeable, and then they want their spouses to, like, be on that level. So I'm not sure there's such disparity here.
You've done good.
Also, we have, Moshe Henriquez from Nicaragua. His son Baruch asks a question: why do we do campfires in Lag BaOmer?
Because there's different reasons, but one of them is because we associate Shimon Bar Yochai with light, with spiritual light, and light is mentioned sometimes in the stories of Shimon Bar Yochai. So that's one of them. And Torah is compared to fire, right? So those would be some reasons for this, but there are more. But so I like the story. Learn, anybody could become a scholar even if they want to, but you have to be willing to. And here was Rabbi Akiva, who embarrassed himself by sitting in school with a little cat lesson.
And the greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. You hope.
You hope, right? And for all of us, like I remember myself, not that I'm comparing myself to Rabbi Akiva in any way, but when I grew up in a conservative synagogue in Queens, and when the rabbi wanted to say that there was something especially profound or important, he would say, "It says in the Talmud." But here I was a college student, and I had never seen a volume of the Talmud. I'd never seen one. I just had heard one quoted. And for my grandchildren who go to, yeshivas all their life, it's like unbelievable, they start Talmud in like 4th grade or something. But I was walking in the stacks of the school library, and I saw these big, tall books with Hebrew letters. And I opened them up, and all these little letters, and I said to myself, I want to learn how to read these little letters someday. And it actually happened. So I think it's a good message. So I particularly relate to that part of the story. And the other part of the story is love and sacrifice, and also changing the story of father-in-law, changing one's mind. A lot of people don't allow themselves to, especially if they're in a fight with somebody, they never allow themselves to get over it because I'm right. Well, sometimes for the I'm right, too much is lost. So that's a little bit about Rabbi Akiva.
Ira
but I want to do
Shankman
more.
is watching,
Hi,
and
Ira.
so is Scott Gallicoff.
Very good, very good. Now,
We have
One
12
other thing I thought of.
yeah,
If you express a wish for something, then you better be prepared to back it up, because he says to his wife, if only I could place this crown on your head of gold. And then she tells him how to do that. She gives him instructions on how to make good on that promise or that desire to please her.
But I guess it's a graphical type of story, but just the idea that he sacrificed so much to marry this woman and to be with her,
And then not be
what
there.
he did was to guarantee that he would not be with her for how many years? Or
24 years.
according to this verse story, 24 years.
At which point he was, by the time they got together again, he was in his 50s, and so there was no
No,
children.
he was older than that
children.
because he was 40 when he
was
started.
40 when he started.
He started, right. So Rabbi Akiva is also a historical figure. He's believed to have been born sometime around the year. He died connected with the revolt of Bar Kokhba. And there are different stories about that. And first, another story about Rabbi Akiva. This is one of the really classical stories about.
I wrote a comment that just made me laugh. Rabbi Akiva's wife was a very patient and tolerant woman.
Yes.
Well, but that evil neighbor of hers, I wonder who she
And
was.
Dan, hey Dan,
He's a bit of a legend. Is he? He's a superhero in a way.
Yeah.
A Jewish superhero. It
Yes,
kind of
he
goes
is.
beyond any reasonable boundaries that we have to question. Was he real, or was this embellished?
Well, there was a real Rabbi Akiva, and we know that. Well, the critical historians look at all these stories and say which one might have some kernel of truth and which one is just literature. But there's also something else. In Agada is a lot of rabbinic literature is divided into Agada and Halacha. Halacha, law, and Agada, telling, which may be stories and legends and so forth. And let's say literature to make a point. Some of it are really ancient sermons. Others are historical recollections or have at their source a historical recollection. And many of them are written in a way to make a point and make a lesson, teach a lesson. Now here's something which is sometimes disputed in Jewish circles. Did the events in the Agada, the stories, did it really happen? Some of them seem quite fantastic and exaggerated and so forth. Well, there's a number of different opinions. There are those who believe that they happened exactly right like they're written. And then there are others who say that they are stories.
like truth is stranger than fiction. What is that? Truth is stranger than fiction? What's that expression?
Many of the
Right?
many of the stories out of the Agada are corroborated by Roman literature, which was all about their victory, and certainly the destruction of the Hebrew people is considered a great thing in Roman literature, and how they killed people with the crosses, and how Akiva died. It's an Agadic literature, and it's also in Roman literature, corroborated.
So again, some of them are historical basis. But Maimonides wrote that many of the stories of the rabbis, for example, there's a story about that the people who were swallowed up when the ground opened up and swallowed Korach, that they're lost forever, and no one knows where, what. And I forget who it was. One of the Tanaim says, "Oh, I was there, and I put my ear to the ground, and I heard them saying Moses was right." So did that really happen? Well, Maimonides and the son of Maimonides wrote a whole introduction to the study of Agada, which says, well, no, those are stories. They're parables. And they're meant to teach a lesson. And they use various techniques, including exaggeration. And he, in his introduction to the study of Agada, goes through the various techniques, literary techniques that they use, and enumerates them. And Maimonides further says, in his commentary on the Mishnah, Perek HaChelek, he says, no, that those people who take everything literally who think that in that they're showing respect to the rabbis of ancient times, are really disrespecting them. Because if they take literally things that are meant to be parables and illustrations, then they're putting ridiculous thoughts and words into the minds of the rabbis, who were not ridiculous. So again, there's different opinions on
Mark
that. But some of
Newman
them
has
are
a
that.
nice opinion up here. Every story has a basis in fact.
I like that one. A basis, in fact. But different stories are told in order to reinforce different points and different points of view. But so anyway, here we have a story which I think is a wonderful story, and it's very short, so it's one of the classics about Rabbi Akiva, and Bonnie will read it for us, and We once did this in one of my Friday classes, and one of our temple members, one who usually comes to this class actually, had a very interesting explanation of them, which never would have occurred to me on my own. Okay?
The rabbis taught, there were 4 who entered the Pardes, sublime
And
orchard.
some think that refers to mystical speculation or meditation or something like that.
And they are Ben Azai, Ben Zomer, Elisha Ben Avuya,
Who is
Acher.
called Acher means that one, the other one, because Elisha ben Abuya, well, something happened to him after he went to the Pardes, the garden, which I'll mention later.
And Rabbi Akiva. Before they entered, Rabbi Akiva said to them, when you reach near the pure marble stones, do not say water, water, because it says, a speaker of lies shall not abide before my eyes.
Oh, no one knows quite what that means, okay?
Ben Azai glanced and died. Ben Zoma glanced and became unstable.
Well, a lot of the translations say he became crazy. He lost his sanity, okay?
Acher chopped down saplings, and Rabbi Akiva emerged in peace.
So it needs a little bit of an explanation, this story. So they entered the garden, the
See,
Pardes.
Pardes is Pshat, Rash, and Sod.
Yeah.
Okay,
Pshat.
so the explanation of Pardes, which is translated into a garden, you have a P, D, and S.
And an
P
R.
And an R, so the P stands for Pshat, the literal meaning. The Resh Par stands for Remez, hints. The Daled, the D, stands for Drash, which means rabbinical stories. And the S stands for Sod, secret. So it's the secret meaning of the text. So it says that the 4 of them went into the different levels of learning, the literal meaning, the hidden meaning, the secret meaning, the obvious meaning, okay? And they all came out affected in different ways.
Okay.
Scott has a comment that
Yes.
paradise is the same word as paradise.
Pardes
Yes.
is the same word as paradise, yes.
Oh, I was
Right.
going to say something about Pardes. It sounds like Pardes is very dangerous.
Yeah, well,
good.
Could be
well,
dangerous.
that's right, because 2 of the guys got wounded entering this paradise.
Okay, so
like Indiana
they
Jones.
saw something.
Nancy Shankman is watching.
Hi, Nancy. They saw something, they experienced something which is very powerful and very overwhelming. So it says, Ben Azai sitz vameti. Piti looked and died. Ben Zoma sitz vinivka. He was struck, which is often understood that he became crazy, he lost his sanity. Acher, the other one, Kotzetz binitiot. He chopped down the saplings. Well, that's kind of a metaphor, and how that really works, I'm not sure. But who was Acher? Acher was Elisha ben Abuya, who was one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, and a very, was a contemporary more than student. He was a very important scholar and very wise scholar, but at a certain point in his life, he became a non-believer and a non-practicer of
He
Judaism.
cut down the saplings in the garden,
Yeah.
Okay, and
okay?
there's some mention, and someone actually wrote a whole book about it, about him, Elisha ben Abuya. It's called As a Driven Leaf. It was
Milton Steinberg.
Milton Steinberg, right? And in it, he has the theories, it's written in a couple other places as well, that it says that there's a mitzvah to chase the mother bird from the nest before you take the eggs, that it will lengthen your life. So somebody went and to do that and fell off the ladder and was killed. So, and this led to a line of questioning which led Acher to say the classic statement of Jewish heresy, leit din v'leit dayan. There is no judgment and there is no judge.
Rabbi Ivri says that Akiva went in b'shalom, he went in peace and left in peace because He went in with the right perspective.
Ah, right. And he was the only one.
But he was the only one that was not changed by the experience.
Yeah, that
Is
was
that
Gary's
a good
explanation.
thing or a bad thing?
See, Gary had that explanation, Gary Carcel, which is, I would have never occurred to me.
His perspective, though, was informed by humility. That whatever he learned, and there were some things that were profound, he was grounded, unlike those that kept looking for pardes without grounding. And that's,
He went in with the right perspective.
Right,
Yeah.
and Rabbi,
In other words, been there, done that.
right, but Rabbi Akiva is also known for his humility.
yeah.
That was one of the virtues of Rabbi Akiva, humility, and he is a very important person because Rabbi Akiva arranged and systematized Jewish law. And the Mishnah, which was written by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, written by Yehuda HaNasi, is based on the teachings and Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva is a very fundamental person, and Rabbi Akiva was also the one who pushed the view more than others that everything in the Torah is divine and teaches us something, laws and attitudes and perspectives and so forth, that if there's any kind of word which might be redundant or seem redundant, it's not really, it's to teach us a whole teaching, a whole world. And what is that Rabbi Akiva was Doresh, he expounded on the tagin, on the crowns, on the letters of the Torah. You know, in the Torah, some crowns have letters, some letters have crowns on them. Mm-hmm. And he derived laws and teachings from the crowns. Because there's one on this letter, on this word, on that word, here, there. So Rabbi Akiva said, well, this is not just random or decorations. Each one is, by its arrangement, is to teach us something. So his views in that way were very influential and very profound. And our Judaism today is very much shaped by Rabbi Akiva's perspective on things.
Rabbi Ivri said that unfortunately too many people go off the deep end exploring the mystical, and they come out like a little bit, if you say weird, I mean that wasn't the comment here, but they get out there flying a little and they come out, right.
Or they come to, say, deny some of the essential teachings, or come to have a contempt for daily life as it's lived.
When I was,
which maybe is less one of the lessons of the other story, yeah?
when I was a little girl and in Jewish schools, right? So we were taught to only respect the holy rabbis, Chazal, and so you couldn't really give your own commentary on it, but because it's what Rashi said, or Rambam said, or Ramban said, and you went with the traditional commentaries. And I had this girl in my class, her name was Zahava, and Zahava made her own commentary. And so she would raise her hand and say, Perush Zahava, Zahava's commentary, and she would make her thing. Now, for some of the rabbis, they would get so bent out of shape on Perush Zahava because, according to like the Rabbi Akiva approach, you only stay in the straight and narrow path and the text only has meaning in the eyes of the traditional commentaries. I mean, that's one of the teachings. So, and in a way, that's called the Masorah, the tradition, and God is supposed to protect the Masorah, how it's handed down. So anything that goes from outside and that's brought in is like a foreign thing. So Perush Zahava was very challenging to my moras in school, to my teachers, and it's kind of along that line, yeah.
Well, so again, today, well, not just today again, there's just different kinds of study of Torah. There's the academic critical perspective, and then there's the traditional religious perspective, and then there are those who try to, combine them both. And whether that's entirely successful, I'm not sure. In a certain way, it's not either. but I think sometimes I think that's the best way. Now, so we learned a lot about Rabbi Akiva, and we're going to just finish up a little bit. And again, Rabbi Akiva is connected to the revolt of Bar Kokhba. He was one of those who originally endorsed Bar Kokhba and said he was the Messiah or a messianic figure. And he supported him. And whether he was actually really involved in the revolt, or to what extent he was a supporter of Bar Kokhba, is not entirely known. That's something that when people have write about it, it's a little bit ambiguous. There's the story about this, which I won't read, but I'll just sort of tell it, about Rabbi Akiva, is an interesting one because it doesn't show opposition to the Romans in a direct way so much as the desire to study Torah. So, the revolt of Bar Kokhba was defeated, and this was a tremendous disaster for the Jewish people. I think if we have the disasters in our history, they would be the destruction of the temple, the revolt of Bar Kokhba, and the Holocaust. And all of them were tremendous disasters, the results of which we live every day. But after the revolt was crushed, the Roman Emperor Hadrian forbid the study of Torah and the practice of Judaism. And particularly harsh was the prohibition against the study of Torah. So, Rabbi Akiva is continuing to publicly teach Torah. And one of his associates, Papas was his name, says, what are you doing this for? The Romans will kill you. And he responds with a little story, which perhaps you might have heard.
You need to read some of these comments
Ah.
here. So Rabbi Ivri said, as
According to
long as
Rambam.
Peirus Zahava follows the 13 principles that the Torah is studying.
Okay, I like
Okay.
that. But what if it
Yeah.
doesn't?
Okay. And Rabbi Ivri says, according to Maimonides, Akiva proclaimed Bar Kokhba to be the Mashiach.
Right. Yeah. So, but this sounds, the extent of his connection maybe is still questioned by some. That's according to Maimonides, which is based on sources. But there are those who say that he didn't exactly, or that he only supported him in the beginning. It seems in the beginning, more people supported him. Before the failing of Rabbi Akiva of Bar Kokhba is recorded that he said, "Kochi ve'otzem yadi asal yadachayil hazeh." My strength and the power of my hand brought me all these victories, and rather than relying on God. Well, so Rabbi Akiva continued to teach Torah, and so his friend said to him, "Well, look, the Romans are going to get you." And he responded with a very famous story. If I remember it exactly, I was looking for the actual source, but I had trouble finding it. There's a fox and a fish, and the fish is in the water, and the fox says to the fish, "Look, you're in the water, and don't you know it's dangerous? Of course, there are a lot of hooks and fishermen, and they could catch you. Why don't you come and live on the dry land with me, where there are no fishermen and no hooks?" And the fish answered, here in the water I have a chance of survival, but on the dry land I have none at all. And so, said Rabbi Akiva, when studying Torah is my life, but without studying Torah I would be like a fish on the dry land. And so Rabbi Akiva continued to study Torah, and he was imprisoned by the Romans in Caesarea, today's Caesarea, which was the Roman administrative capital of what they at this time called Palestine, because the Romans were very angry that the Jews revolted. The first revolt and Bar Kokhba revolt, because the Romans felt they didn't deserve it. They didn't do anything that bad to the Jews that the Jews should take such offense to them. And so they did different things. For example, after the destruction of the temple, they destroyed Jerusalem entirely, that it was plowed over, as a field was plowed over. They diverted the money that used to go to the half shekel for the offering of the temple to pay for the Roman occupation of the land of Israel. They did all, among the things they did, they had a special coin called the Judea Capta coin, minted, in which there's a palm tree in the middle, and one side is a Roman soldier, and the other side is a dejected woman crying, and it's a Judea Capta. Judea is captured,
Captive.
has been defeated.
Captured.
And they changed the name from Judea to Palestine. And that's why we have Palestinians today. It's based on that. Jews called it Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, always. So anyway, so Hadrian had, the Roman government had Rabbi Akiva imprisoned in Caesarea. And I visited Caesarea, if any of you have. There's the ruins of Roman Caesarea, part of it at least. Caesarea was a city built by King Herod and had a port, which was built in a remarkable way. Yes?
Didn't you take us to Caesarea in 2008?
Yes, and that's when we were there. And someone pointed out that this is probably the place where Akiva was imprisoned and executed. So let's just read. It's on the first page of the packet right there. Does anybody want to read it? Michael, want to read it?
Can I read?
Yeah, it says Brachot 61b, the bottom one on the first page.
When they, I guess that is, out to face his execution, it was the time of the recital of the Shema. And
Flesh.
right. Oh, they were combing his flesh with iron combs. Combs. I'm a little tired tonight. They were combing his flesh with iron combs, yet lifting upon himself the yoke of the heavenly kingdom.
Which is what you're supposed to think when you recite the when you recite the first paragraph of the Shema.
His students said to him, "Our teacher, even to this verse, with all your soul," meaning, even if he takes your soul. I said to myself, when the opportunity arrives that I may fulfill, when may the opportunity arrive that I may fulfill this verse? And now that the time has come, should I not fulfill it? Rabbi Akiva was drawing out the word echad until his soul departed with echad.
Right. So all his life, he said, he looked for the chance to fulfill God with all his soul, which is understood as even at the price of his soul, at the price of his life. And now he was happy that he had a chance to fulfill that. And his life was given for the sake of the study of the Torah. And so I think we'll finish here. There's so much about Rabbi Akiva that we went through some of the stories about his life and his teachings, but there's so much more. Really one of the fundamental figures in Judaism and Jewish thought, and one of our forebears, And I want to thank everybody for coming, and those who are online as well.